how's it going?
I'm doing really well. How are you, Jen?
I'm great. So, what's on your mind today?
Well, as you know, I'm doing my yoga therapy training right now, and the most recent training module or workshop, I guess, that I did, it was taught by another senior irest teacher, and John Vossler. And he was talking about emotions, feelings and emotions in that one. And as you and I know, through irest, emotions is a big part of us learning to have different relationships with our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings. Um, and I just really love the way that John explained from his perspective, how he saw feelings and emotions. And one of the things that he brought up was that us as a society, or many of us, or most of us, we really have not been taught how to be with our feelings and emotions. And feelings and emotions, the way that he differentiates it, and even in our IRS training, feelings are more about bodily sensations, such as, oh, this is hot, or this is cold, or it's heavy or light. So those are sensations, feelings. And then emotions are um, the way he put it, I hope I get it right, but he said something like your emotions are the conceptual label you have around your feelings.
Mhm.
So when you're sad, when you're angry, when you are joyful, when you're in love, all of these things that we've kind of put a label on it and say, okay, that's an emotion. But what that really is, it's a collective a combination of different sensations in the body that we've named anger or that we've named sadness or whatnot. Anyways, so what he was saying was that for many of us, we have become quite detached from our feelings and emotions. We've kind of delegated everything up to the mind and say, okay, you figure this out. And such that we have become afraid of feeling into our feelings to understand what emotions are coming up. And the thing is, as you know, as you and I know, with feelings, emotions, these are things that we have to deal with through the body. It's not just that you can think your emotions away, right? We can rationalize about many things, but we can't rationalize your feelings. When you feel a certain way, there's no amount of talking is going to make that feeling disappear. We have to work with what's in the body. But if we're not willing to feel what's in our body, how do we even work with what's there?
I feel
So that
like
was really interesting.
there's a great disconnect often. You and I have been working with people, and then we might ask them where they feel a certain something in their body. And like sometimes they say they feel nothing. And it's interesting this disconnect that we have as well with, not only emotions, but with these physical sensations. So people can't, you know, differentiate when something's, they know what pain might be, but they can't localize where the pain is, or they just know they need to see a doctor, or they might feel good, but then what is good, like what's the texture? So it's an interesting thing. And as I think using the iRest for sure, and having people experience more and more like through body sensing or exploring the face and the body, they start to develop this deeper connection with themselves so that they can maybe start to open up to these emotions, which I guess is sort of when we do the IRES, going through these sheaths, that after a while, maybe being able to feel it in their body, when they have that connection again, maybe they are more open to this connection with these deep emotions.
Yeah, and another interesting thing that John was saying was that sometimes, because our mind wants to get involved with everything, it's like we feel safe when we're in our mind. And so even when we ask someone how you're feeling, where are you sensing it, um, oftentimes what happens is that we color the experience, our present experience, with a story. So, so many times I've worked with clients and students, where, we would do a co-meditation, a dyad, and um, I would ask, well, what are you sensing? And then they'll, instead of saying what might be present as a sensorial experience, it is about, oh, it's concepts. It's about, oh, I sense that this emotion is here and it's probably from my childhood, probably because of my fear of commitment or a sense of abandonment. Like, so they'll go into storytelling, and they'll start rationalizing, and I have to remind them, but where are you feeling this and what are you feeling, right? And then it might get them back in their body for a moment, but then again, it's about the story again. So we're very tied up with our stories, and then it's almost like it's a way to distract us from what's actually here.
It's interesting because I know when we learned all the different sheaths or interwoven koshas, it was a relief for me to realize, like, wow, so emotions just one little part and thoughts are just one little part. And each of these are just one little part of it. It's not the whole. And although, our society really relies on the cognitive side, maybe, evolving from the physical side being our way of protecting ourselves very much in this, the way we work now and live, it's our cognitive mind that keeps us safe, right? Because it's the intellectual part. So it's interesting when we realize that, just the thoughts is not all of us. Even the sense of I is not all of us, right? In our human form. I feel like it's a relief, and then you can maybe like disidentify with the thoughts, and then be able to recognize it as just one little piece. But I guess it's definitely a journey to get there. When people, they're still learning, like, oh, my narration, that could be more the cognitive side. I'm not spending enough time in my physical side or my pranayama, my breathing side, or once I guess they start to realize that, and maybe the pathway is through thinking, right? So learning the concepts we've learned in irest. But it's interesting how that works. It's so true. People, all of us tend to go into narration. I mean, our podcast is narrating events. So it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, and I guess with the IREST practice and also with what John was talking about is that, how can we start to bring more awareness to the body? Because that's really lacking. And as much as we like to live in our minds, in our heads, we're not getting away from the body, because if that were working, then we'd be fine. But we're feeling something. We're feeling something is not okay. We're struggling with our emotions. It's not that we're detached from it. We're not completely detached from it. We feel suffering because we're feeling something from the body that's telling us something is not right. And so, but instead of dealing with it from the place of the body, or actually not just from the body, the mind, like you say, can be very helpful. There's no integration. It's just like, oh, I'm going to just try to fix everything from up here. There's only so much you can do from the mind. And so, but we're still feeling like, oh, something is not right, but we're not able to allow ourselves to actually, meet the body and see, okay, what's going on? Can I help you here? And so a lot of our mechanisms for this is about, oh, I'm just going to distract myself. I know something is not right, but I'm going to do something here. I'm going to do it so then I don't have to deal with what's in here, or that I'll project this out onto the, my situation external to myself, so that I'll say, you make me angry, or you make me sad, or even you make me fall in love, or whatever. Like, it's all the emotions John was talking about. It's not just the negative ones, but then now we start to project out all of these things, and it can create, obviously it can create an issue because you're not dealing with what's actually in here. So you can yell at the people outside of you all you want, but if it's something that's within you that needs attention, you need to go within. The second issue that I see is that, like I said, the negative emotions you might project out, but even the positive ones. So now you start to have attachments and you start to think, oh, I need this person in my life because they're my source of joy or they're my source of love. And so we now become dependent on our external situations for us to feel okay. And so this is the opposite of what the spiritual teaching is telling us. And that is, that is why we feel so much suffering.
Yeah, I think once more and more people realize just um, that emotions can be very temporary, right? And give themselves a moment, especially through the practice, right? When we give ourselves to practice, when we're feeling more harmonious or calm and at ease, rather than in that time when we really need to be able to practice it. But when we practice it before more and more, I feel um, when we can feel these big emotions and welcome them, if they decide to visit that time, when it happens again, it doesn't seem as big. And it's interesting, a lot of times that's what a lot of the students have said during our sessions, where they felt completely at ease. They didn't know what was going to visit. Some big emotion visited, but there was some kind of relief because maybe they were too stressed during the week to really give themselves a moment to feel into it. But because they were just being welcoming and it happened to come visit during that 30-minute session we had, there was a relief. And I guess more and more once we practice it, naturally, because we've seen it, we've given it space. So that whole law of awareness, right? And now we can move past it.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up an excellent point is that everything is temporary, right? Everything within our awareness is transiting, it's going through the 5 cycles of the 5 rights of awareness, as John Vossler was saying, and also in our training, is that, everything is birth, it grows, it stabilizes, it decays, and then it dies. Everything within our awareness will go through these 5 stages. Sometimes when we have emotions, we can perceive that, oh, this is what I'm going to feel forever. Or if I allow myself to feel into this, this will be forever. And it is really important to remember that nothing is forever and that it is, as hard and as difficult some emotions might be, it's temporary. And also that we live in a world where we experience our world in a dualistic way. So whatever you are able to feel into, you can also feel into the opposite. And so it's not just this emotion and forever this emotion, but when we are actually able to feel into whatever emotion that you might be working with, you actually have more of an ability and capacity to feel into the opposite. And so it's a beautiful thing. And so it's just for certain people who you say, I feel nothing or I feel numb, when they've blocked off them or protected themselves so much from what they perceive as negative, they're also blocking out positive. They're blocking out the positive or the opposite of the negative, right? And so, this is why irest is such a beautiful practice, is because it slowly helps you to feel safe enough to feel into things that make you feel uncomfortable. And so it's not about, oh, okay, I need to feel into my emotions and let's open all the doors and then I'm going to get flooded and overwhelmed. And that's not what we're trying to do here. We're really trying to do step by step through the irest process. And as you know, the first thing that we really do in an irest practice is how can we establish safety? So that's the first thing that we help our students and clients. And then step by step, as we start to feel safe and grow strong in our inner resource, then we start to think, oh, can we be a little bit more open to something that might be a little bit uncomfortable? And so we kind of build up to a point where we're like, okay, let's see if I can welcome this emotion, right?
For sure. You make me think back to when I was going through one of my trainings, I had volunteered to sit up there with Stephanie. And all week, it's such a special time when you go for this training, right? Because you're fully immersed, you're among people who are fully immersed, and your wakefulness and sleep sleep time is all related to this training naturally. And so I remember what was emerging was a lot of love. And I think mine was related maybe to opposites or emotions. And I remember looking at my Yoga Nidra book for that, all the different, from one extreme love all the way to the opposite. And I think it was hate that was on the opposite end. And I kind of like freaked out, going, oh my gosh, is that what's going to arise when I talk to Stephanie? And feeling really kind of concerned about the whole thing. Because I'd still kind of been new to the whole, all of it, right? I was still in training. And I remember it was a catharsis. I don't know necessarily, I don't think it was necessarily hate that it arose, but whatever it was this catharsis of, residues of emotions that, I'd been working through. I guess we continue to work through, right? So it was an interesting thing, like just kind of freaking out, realizing that the hate might be the complete opposite of love. But then being open to whatever, because I knew I was going to be held safely with the community and with Stephanie guiding it. So it's interesting, right? Like when you can feel at ease, like you said, in there's this safe container, physically and in every way, like energetically. You can allow anything to rise, and often it's not as extreme as you think it's going to be. Like you think you're just going to break down, but maybe not. Maybe that's not what's going to arise. It's sometimes our thinking that's much more challenging and complicated than the reality of the emotion or the feeling in the body.
Definitely. And for those listening and are not aware of the irest community, Jen is talking about Stephanie Lopez, who's the director of irest Institute. And yeah, I've had in my training, I also sat with her, and she did also a meditation with me as well. And it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. I felt very safe and, lovingly held by her. But yeah, I think with the irest practice, it's really about helping us to find that deeper peace within ourselves so that we can really welcome in our experience and not even needing to worry about what might come through, because the peace that we feel within is going to be the foundation. It's our ground, and it's going to be strong enough for us to stay grounded as we meet our challenges. And so when you're always in a place where you feel safe, then what's there to fear? Like even fear is welcome. And it's not, so I think that we have created a story about the different emotions that we feel. And one of the points that John Vossel was saying was that sometimes maybe we've had an experience of that emotion in the past, and it overwhelmed us so much that now we've become very afraid of it. And so then we start to avoid at all costs to feel into that emotion again. But keeping in mind that when you had first felt that emotion, maybe you were a child. Maybe you didn't have the resources that you needed for you to be okay to feel into it. So whatever experience you've had before informs kind of what you do now, but it doesn't mean that it's helpful for you to react the same way as you did when you were 5 years old, right? So maybe at some point, certain things were protective and helpful. Some of the reactions that you've had in certain situations may have been helpful. But now, as an adult, and we're in different circumstances, it may no longer be helpful. And so this is why, some people would think, well, if it were protected before, why would I need to change anything? If it still worked for you, you probably don't need to change anything. But I think that if you are seeking help, or, you are feeling like it's not okay, then there are some mechanisms that are no longer working for you. And part of it could be that you're not feeling your feelings.
Think of I like looking at puppy videos. You know that about me. And there was one I was reading because it kind of related to emotions, and it was the sweetest dachshund in this Instagram post, and they were just talking about how just how deep we know animals feel as well, emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And this one was just about how your dog can get really hyper when you're about to take it for a walk, and it just goes crazy on the leash and maintains this craziness. But they were relating that to sort of like, I guess, with childhood, right? So if you have been like, you get them all excited and riled up about the walk, and then every time they see that forever now, they're all riled up, right? And then they're all riled up during the walk. So they were relating how, if you can approach them more and just keep practicing when they're calm, right? So come more and more with this big, exciting thing of going for a walk. But each time, showing them that they can be calm, and then we're going to go for a walk, then they'll continue to be calm, throughout the whole experience together. So it's amazing, right? Because that's sort of the same with us, right? Like we start to get habituated, or like you said, we could get averse to certain emotions because it caused us much suffering when we were little. But then maybe when we realize and we kind of retrain our nervous system, that we can accept everything, we can accept everything with ease, even fear, like you said, and things that might have been uncomfortable in the past. But yeah, it's that taking the time to retrain and help even the physical side of it all in order to welcome everything.
Yeah. So do you have a tip for our listeners today, Jen?
For dealing with emotions, I had one, but I have to come back to it because I have to formulate. But what were you going to say?
Um, so I think that, what we're saying is feel your emotions, but I also don't want to say that's what you should do, feel your emotions, because I also really believe and respect the wisdom of the body as well. And so there are certain things that your body's like, oh, it's not safe here. Don't go there yet. Or don't go there. And so I think that we want to work with the body. It's not about breaking anything open right away. It's about, okay, well, let's do it step by step, baby steps. If we're not feeling our emotions, why? And most likely it's because you don't feel safe. Because if you're okay to feel into something, you will. Like even positive emotions, some people, because we're talking about negative emotions and how it might be scary to feel into them. For some people, joy is what's causing anxiety because they have a story around joy. So it's not just about negative emotions that we're not feeling, but like just we said, there's probably a negative that they're worried about. And so therefore they're not going to fully feel into its opposite. So it's so interesting how it plays out. We always think about the negative ones that I don't want to feel, but whatever you cannot accept, you also cannot accept the opposite either fully, right? And so it doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative emotions that you're working with. If there's a resistance there, I would not rush it. I would just, be okay with, okay, this is where I'm at. But one thing we can start cultivating is that inner resource that we always teach in the irest practice. If it's unsafe to feel into joy, or if it's unsafe to feel into anger, or whatever it is, let's build that safety first. And then with time, as you feel safe, then you're more likely to be a little bit curious about other things, because if you're so afraid, there's nowhere you're going to go. You'd be like, this is it. I'm not getting out of, my metaphorical house. I'm not going outside. This is where I feel safe. But if there's a way for you to feel like, okay, maybe I can crack the window open a little bit, or maybe I can open the door, or whatever it is, when we can cultivate a sense of safety within, that's going to be the foundation of us being able to inquire and being able to feel a little bit more as we start to feel our feelings, if you like. And maybe Jen, you might want to expand a bit on what the inner resource is, maybe a practice for our viewers.
So for the inner resource, we can connect through it through different ways. So through imagery, enlivened by all the senses, or through words that might, bring us to that ease, even the word okayness. And I've had students say the sound of their own name, or the word mom or dad actually brings them to ease. So whatever that is. And then the felt sense for sure, I've had people say there's this release in their muscles that brings them towards the inner resource, or releasing the jaw, even like wherever there's tension, often it's the opposite of that, maybe that might bring them closer to their inner resource. And definitely, as an educator, as we teach, little bite-sized pieces of this, like the inner resource, um, and using all the senses, like children are so great at using their imagination and feeling into their body. Um, that they can come up with an inner resource that's, maybe totally different than what we might come up with as adults. But that's what makes it so special. And I was also going to suggest for, especially with families, like even just teaching them a bit about the brain, how there's an amygdala, and you can call it something else, right? There's a great book called The Scribble Spot that talks about emotions. And so knowing that the scribble spot lives in the amygdala and that there's a prefrontal cortex, which they call the wise owl sometimes, and how they get separated sometimes when the amygdala has big emotions. And then letting children understand, that it's all natural. They're all natural emotions. And for adults as well, like all of us sometimes think that they shouldn't be feeling this emotion. And there are really no negatives and really no positives in our irest sense, right? They're just the so-called ones, or the ones that keep us away from our wholeness, which are more so-called negative, or the ones that put us more towards our wholeness, which are the so-called positive ones, right? But as we understand all of this, can understand that it's all natural, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, that we have these emotions, and that through meditation and through body scanning and any of these practices, we can maintain this connection so we can make better decisions and communicate clearer that maybe, yeah, I'm feeling angry at this moment. And then because I've used a breath practice or something, I can actually verbalize I'm feeling angry because of the situation rather than just, reacting and attacking that person and blaming it on them. So yeah, I totally recommending, educating people with the inner resource and with how brains work, for sure.
Thank you so much, Jen. Those are wonderful, wonderful recommendations and tips, and I hope that our listeners will be able to make use of them. You don't have to think about doing like a whole 30-minute meditation in order to bring these practices in. Think of these as micro practices that you can bring into your day. Can we bring in the inner resource? Can you maybe conjure up an image or something that makes you feel like, oh, I feel okay, or I feel safe in my body? And you don't need to even do it for very long. It could just be, okay, I'm going to stay here for about 5 breaths and really feel into my inner safety, inner resource. And then let it go back into your day, and then come back to this again and again throughout the day. And so little by little steps, baby steps will lead the way.
Thank you so much. See you
Thank you
next
so
time.
much. See you next time.